Welcome to the final part of At the Helm with your host, Justin Helms, co-host,
Darren Helms. Father Helms.
A whole lot of helms here. But whole lot of helms. I like that. But we need a t-shirt. Right. I would say that this is the last part, and this is going to be kind of combined. The first section is going to be the rankings. My dad wanted to do the rankings with me. He didn't want to do the week 6 picks. He's more of an SEC guy. He knows those games a little bit more. So, and I like to branch out a little more than that to make it not as biased as I am sometimes for SEC.
This guy is watching Texas Tech.
Dude, I like college football, so it's crazy. You would never call me watching Texas Tech like 2 years ago. So, but it gives us a lot to talk about. So yeah, right. I'll do this, and then I'm gonna edit in the week 6 picks, and you guys will see what that looks like. It's gonna be me, and then it's gonna cut, and then it's gonna be us, and then it's gonna cut, and then it's gonna be me. So first, I wanted to say we're doing the rankings a little bit different. Last time we went 1-1, 2-2, and we went down the line and talked about it. In order for me to format things a little bit better for some of my other platforms like TikTok and stuff like that, I want you to give all 6 of your teams, and then I'm going to give all 6 of my teams, and then we're going to talk about why right after.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so with my rankings, and during my rankings, you will hear me. I have to apologize to one team. I have to apologize a little bit to one team because, a couple of weeks ago, I said this team was a pretender. And I've since changed my mind a little bit. I'm not saying they're a world beater, but we'll get to that. To that. Okay, so number one on my list is I'm not sure what the AP poll is seeing, but
I don't know what they're looking at.
In my opinion, at this point, Ohio State is number 1. Now, I preface that by saying that there is no team out there that appears to be a world beater at this point and just way ahead of anyone else.
Yeah.
But I would say if I look at all the teams out there, Ohio State is the closest. They seem to have an all-around team. Of course, C.J. Stroud is doing his thing offensively. They're great. They have a decent defensive, side of the ball also. They're doing good things on that end. So just in terms of being an all-around team and just from what I've seen them play on the field so far, I would say Ohio State would be the number 1 team at this point. So I have them first on my list. And then number two and number 3, I struggle with that a little bit.
I struggle
because both of these teams, in my opinion, have shown some weaknesses.
Yep.
But I'll go with I'll go with Georgia. Georgia at this point, based on what we saw in the last Alabama game and what we saw in the Georgia game, although I think over the course of 6 games, both teams have shown some weaknesses. I'll say Georgia at number 2 at this point in time. Now they still appear to be working out some things. They're young on both sides of the ball. We didn't really see that in the first couple of games, but then over the last few games, they haven't been winning as convincingly. I'm not saying that, they've had to pull it out in the last second, but they haven't been winning in a dominant fashion in these last few games. But Georgia at number 2, Alabama at 3. I'm good with Alabama at 3 at this point. Not only because of the last game against Texas A&M and Jalen Milroe being in there, but just overall, Alabama, I know statistically it doesn't always show it, but if you're an Alabama fan and you just look at some of the actual play during key situations, it doesn't always look good. I go back to the secondary a lot of times. I go back to the offensive line and this inconsistency. So I would say Alabama at number 3. Now, the bright spots are Jahmyr Gibbs has started to.
He has really turned on in the last 2 games.
He's really come around in the last couple of games, and it looks as if they're starting to see who should be in there starting at offensive line, but they keep playing with it and going back and forth and that type of thing. So Alabama is at number 3, and this is the team that number 4. This is the team where I have to apologize a little bit. I apologize. No.
Yeah, the only reason I couldn't play that song I wanted to.
Yeah, I'm going to Anita Baker on them. That's old school. You young people probably don't know much.
I would have done it, but we would have got copyrighted. Right. YouTube would have took me down. I thought about it. Yeah, I really did.
But I have to apologize to Clemson. I'm still not at a point where I'm saying Clemson is a world beater and they're going to win the championship and that type of thing. But when I called Clemson a pretender a few weeks ago, I think I was tainted by their first couple of games because they won the games, but they were playing Georgia Tech. They played Furman. They played Louisiana Tech, and they just were not winning in a dominant fashion. You know, and I still saw where the quarterback, I always have a hard time pronouncing his name. Quarterback. Right. I still saw where in the beginning he still looked a little shaky. But the last few games, I think, you know, they're Wake Forest. Wake Forest, they had to go into overtime. Yes. Right. They had to go into overtime to win that game. But North Carolina State and Boston College, they won pretty convincingly. And then when I started looking at them a little bit closer, on the offensive side of the ball, they've won both ways. You know, they've won balance. And then I see where, the quarterback is starting to play better now. Again, I'm not saying he's the best thing going out there, but he's starting to play a lot better when compared to last year. So I have to, I have to back off of calling them a pretender now. I'm saying they're in it. They're a contender, but we'll see as time moves on if they continue moving in that direction. And then and then I had a hard time between my number 5 team is Tennessee. I struggled for a minute just trying to figure out who should be 4 and who should be 5 because I think you can play with those two also. But the only reason I put Tennessee at 5 is because Clemson has been there.
Yep.
Clemson has been
I
there.
said this to you last time we were here. You tried to tell me Kentucky would beat them. And I was like, what?
That was a different time, different conversation.
You apologize.
Right, I apologize. But that's the only reason Clemson edges out Tennessee for me at this point. It's just because they've been there in Tennessee. Although I was tempted to put them at 4, they're just now starting to look good again this year. Yep. So I'm not quite ready. I need to see them play in Alabama, see them play in Georgia. And then at that point, if they come out and they do their thing, maybe they jump. Clemson, because in my mind at that point, they would have played better competition than Clemson overall.
Exactly.
But at this point, I'm going to put Tennessee at number 5, and then I'll stick with USC at number 6. Michigan, to me, they still look shaky. I know I could have played between USC and Michigan, but Michigan, to me, they're winning, but they still look very shaky to me. And it's not like USC has just won in any type of dominant fashion, but when I compare the two teams, they still look a little bit better to me than Michigan does at this point. And Caleb Williams, I think, makes the difference. With Caleb Williams being at quarterback, I think he makes the difference.
And I agree. I don't know when the college football playoff committee is going to do their rankings. I would say it has to be in the next 2 weeks. It's going to be sometime in October before November hits. But I agree that when that comes out, we're going to see just how far they put Michigan down. I don't think they're going to be in that top 6 like we talked about. Right now, the AP poll has Michigan at 5. And then I'll give the AP poll rankings, and then I'll say mine. AP poll had UGA at 1. You put Ohio State there. Ohio State is number 2. Alabama number 3. Clemson number 4. So in that area, it looks kind of similar. You just had Ohio State and Georgia flipped. And then for 5, they have Michigan. 6, they have Tennessee. 7, they have USC. You have Tennessee moved up 1. Michigan has dropped down to 7. And that's really the biggest difference in that area.
Right.
I about had the same rankings as you. I literally had like almost just about the same thing. But the only difference I had in mind is number 1, I had Ohio State as well. They're a team that has not really struggled at all so far this season. I would love to see them when they run up against a little bit tougher competition. I think they might be one of those few teams like Clemson did in the years when they had Trevor Lawrence, where they're going to run through their division, they're going to run through their conference, they're going to win their conference championship, and they're not going to play anyone until that playoff. I really think that's what it's going to look like, because I don't see it being a close game between them and Michigan either, honestly. Right. Offensively, I think Ohio State is just light years ahead of what Michigan could do, and that's going to be the difference. So Ohio State is number 1, and I think they will remain there until playoffs start to happen. Number 2, I have Georgia there as well. It was so hard not to put Bama in this situation. The only reason that Bama is not here is because Bama had a close game and Auburn went out and they beat the mess out of a trash Auburn team. Alabama played a better team. I will say that right now.
I agree.
I don't think that's biased. I think most people who are listening and watch college football will agree that A&M is better than Auburn. But just the fact that Alabama struggled that much and it came down to literally the last play, you can't put Alabama above Georgia. That's hard to do. Georgia's there, but I really want to put Bama right there because off of what I've seen the past few weeks, I think these teams are very equal. I do too, especially when Bryce Young is there. I think you can actually put Alabama over Georgia at that point. But due to what happened last week, Georgia is 2. Alabama is number 3. I would love to see what they look like against Tennessee. If they go out and they handle business, even if a close loss, I could possibly see them staying at number 3, depending on what happens in the rest of college football.
And who does Georgia play? I can't remember.
Nobody state.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't even know. But number 4, right here, I have Clemson. Now, this is something you're not gonna like. I think 2, 3, and 4 are interchangeable. I think Clemson could slip up to 2. Clemson they beat Wake Forest, they beat NC State, 2 ranked teams, and they have handled them pretty well, except for Wake Forest. Georgia has struggled against 2 unranked teams. Alabama struggled against Arkansas, who was ranked at the time but dropped out right after. They struggled against A&M, who wasn't ranked. They struggled against Texas, but in my opinion, I think Texas should be a ranked team. They look pretty good with what Quinn Ewers has been able to do since he's even gotten back from the injury. They went out and whooped Oklahoma. It didn't look good. So I would argue that Clemson has won, like Asa said, which I hate to admit, like Asa was maybe right. I'm not putting Clemson at 1 because he's crazy for that. But I would like to say that Clemson has a little bit more stronger wins, not better wins, because I feel like the competition, if Clemson played Arkansas and A&M, I think they would look about the same as what our teams did. Mm-hmm. But I would say their wins against the teams that they have played of rank have been more confident. You know what I'm saying? They're more like, okay, like, yeah, they outright beat this team. Like, you know what I'm saying? Right. I think you might see the same thing this week when they play Florida State. I think they're going to outright beat them. But yeah. I know you're going to say Florida State is not these teams. But I agree. I agree that the teams that they're playing in the ACC are not on the same threshold. They're not in the same tier as the teams that we're talking about in the SEC. But due to the fact that we don't know, I could argue Clemson could possibly be in that 2, 3, or 4 spot. Right now, they're number 4 because I think they have stuff to prove, so I'm going to leave them there. Yeah. Number 5, I kept going back and forth with this one too, Tennessee and USC, and I actually switched this right before the show. USC. I'm gonna put at number 5? I'm gonna put USC there, and the biggest reason is not because I think USC would just like go out and beat Tennessee today. Even though I think that would be very close, it would be another quarterback competition: Hendon Hooker versus Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley and Josh Heupel. Those are 2 really good offensive minds of what they've been able to do this year. USC's defense is a little bit better to me. Have they played the same competition? I can see that, yeah. Once again, I don't know if they've quite played the same competition offensively that Tennessee has, and what Florida was able to do, and what Pitt was able to do, and even LSU. Even LSU didn't even put up great numbers, like in terms of points on the board, but stats wise, they were getting down the field. But I will say that I think USC is a little bit better defensively, and then the biggest thing to me is not even that. Tennessee has the chance to prove themselves in the next month and a half. They play Alabama.
And Georgia.
Yeah, exactly. They play Alabama. They play Georgia. They haven't played Kentucky yet, have they?
I don't think they played Kentucky.
They haven't played Kentucky yet. So they play a lot of kind of top-tier competition in this next month and a half that could easily catapult them from number 6 to honestly number 2. So it's hard for me. Maybe number 1. If they beat Georgia and Bama, they're the number 1 team. I'm sorry to Ohio State. They have not beat anyone like that. So they would be number 1, obviously.
If Tennessee beats Georgia and Alabama, they should be number 1. And I think that when the college football poll come out, that will be reflected.
Exactly. So that's right now. I'm putting Tennessee at 6 because they have so much more room to prove that they're better. I'd rather put them at 6 now and then let them win a game and then move them up rather than putting them at 4 right now and then have them lose and then they get dropped to like 12 or something because you know how the playoff committee and you know how the AP poll does it. So right now, I'm going to put them at 6 where it gives them room to grow. And also, if they lose, they won't drop so far because I don't think they're worse than a lot of those other teams in the top 10, even if they do go out and lose to Alabama. So I think that kind of puts them in that middle spot that's perfect for them in terms of moving up and possibly down.
Yeah, I can, although we don't have although our polls are not, our rankings are not the same everywhere, I can agree with you when you talk about some of the reasoning behind it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the only thing with Clemson, maybe it's my SEC bias again, but yes, I know you talked about some of the ranked teams that it played and that type of thing, but, number one, I have that SEC bias. And then number two, you know how I feel about rankings at the beginning of the season.
AP poll is very
right,
weird,
because you come in with these rankings not based on a lot other than just them kind of looking at the players and saying, okay, this person, and then looking at what they kind of did last season, that type of thing. So then when you play that team, you get the benefit of, I'm playing these ranked teams.
AP poll is about the same as the BCS ranking.
Right. So that's the only thing I would say when you start trying to present some type of argument based on rankings before the college football poll comes out. And then also I still think the SEC as a whole, the competition is still a lot stiffer as a whole. So that's why at this point, I can't put Clemson above Georgia and Alabama. And I'm saying, and they still have a lot of time to prove it, to prove themselves. But at this point, I'm still keeping them at number 4.
I'm going to keep them at number 4 for now. Let Alabama lose this game. I think Clemson has to go above them. I mean, of course. I mean, I feel like that's obvious.
You would have a one loss.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's absolutely obvious, but I think it does still need to be said for some of the crazy fans out there, SEC-wise and Alabama-wise, that Clemson is not a team you can sleep on right now. We were hating on them, but based off of what we've seen, I'll give them their credit. And sorry to some of our Clemson fans, Caleb Chapelier, and then what's mom's friend's name, who former Clemson player, got very mad at us.
But, right. Yeah. Marcus.
Yeah, exactly. Former Clemson player had a few choice words from my dad here about what he's seen from Clemson and how he was feeling after the episode we released a couple of weeks ago. And I'll give you a round of applause. I'm sorry. We should have known a little bit better. You knew what you were talking about. You know ball.
Right.
But yeah. Okay, so that's it for my rankings, and I'll give a little bit of Tennessee's schedule, like I said, for the next month and a half. They play Alabama, of course, this week. The week after they play UT Martin. That's not going to mean anything. They play Kentucky, ranked number 22 on October 29th. They play Georgia on November 5th. That's if you take out that UT Martin game, that's 3 ranked opponents back to back to back.
Right.
And then they play Missouri, who gave Georgia a tough time, but Missouri's 2-4. We'll see what that looks like. I don't think it's going to be close. Yeah. Then they play South Carolina, who beat Kentucky somehow last week. I think mostly because Will Levis he wasn't playing, he was hurt. And then Vanderbilt. So
with that schedule, with Tennessee's schedule, I'm saying if they get through that schedule unscathed, I'm saying they're definitely number 1 at that point because you got Alabama, you got Georgia. Now Kentucky, I think that's their other big game, but that's kind of depending on where their quarterback is at that point in time. Because Kentucky 2-3 weeks ago, to me, was a lot stronger than where they are now without their starting quarterback.
I give a lot of South Carolina played a great game. Give a lot of credit to them, but if Will Levis is in that game, I don't think they win.
Right.
So, I would say, as of right now, that's my rankings. 1, Ohio State. 2, Georgia. 3, Bama. 4, Clemson, which is the same for us. Then I have USC at 5, Tennessee at 6. You just flipped Tennessee. You have them at 5,
right.
USC at 6.
Yeah, that's the only change. Yeah, that's the only difference between our rankings.
And that's it for our ranking episode and being here with dear old dad. Thank you.
Father Helms.
Yes, Father Helms. We need a sound for that. And once again, thank you for showing up to my show. I'm sure you'll be back when it comes time for us to play
I'll be
whoever
back.
Down the line, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, everything like that. Love the great insight. Thank you for everything. And I'll see you guys right back on the ranking show. I'm not the ranking, on my week 7 picks. So, deuce. and I will be right back.
All right, welcome back, and this is the final segment of At the Helm, episode 6. I'm going to be doing my week 7 picks for college football, and don't mind me, I have my notes all on my phone, so if you see me looking down a lot, it didn't even get a good view. But yeah, if you see me looking down a lot, that's what I'm really looking at. There was a lot of good games this week, and it's not as easy as just like looking at the names and then picking them as it was in the first few weeks, and then kind of just like telling y'all of the stuff I already know. I had to do a little bit more research this week, I'll admit, and really get down to who I thought was going to win some of these games, because they're a lot closer than people think, and I do have a couple of upsets in here. And sadly, we're going to start with our first upset. And that's me booing myself because I'm choosing against my team. And I hate that, man. I hate that. But first upset, I'm going to go ahead and say it to get it out the way. Tennessee over Alabama this week. See, I almost, look at me. Like, I can't, it's so hard for me to do it. I almost unconsciously chose Bama over Tennessee. But Tennessee over Alabama this week. And in our last episode, you'll see I talked to, or last segment of this episode, you'll see I talked with my dad of a good bit why I chose that game to go the way it will, or I think it will. 31-28 Tennessee is being played in Rocky Top. So that stadium you already know is going to be rocking. They have not been this good in a long time that I can remember. They haven't really challenged Alabama or anybody, honestly, and has to be over a decade or so that I can remember, honestly. And Hendon Hooker's a great quarterback. Tennessee does struggle defensively. They are one of the last teams in terms of defensive rankings, and especially in passing. I think they're 128th out of 131 teams in pass defense. But I don't think that matters. You're playing against a banged-up Bryce Young, a rush team, a team that is really going to rely on the run a lot in that game, and I think Tennessee has to know that by now. They're going to come in hoping to stop the run, trying to get to Bryce Young, and if they get a couple hits on him and make him uncomfortable in that pocket, I can see this game having a couple of turnovers that aren't going to go Alabama's way in terms of interception or fumble, either one. And then Hendon Hooker, I just really, really expect him to get into the Alabama defensive backfield and make them pay for the mistakes that they have been making over the last few games that they've had. I think Alabama as a whole, stat-wise, defensively, looks very good. But if you go and watch those games, you can see multiple instances where, okay, if a better team has better talent to exploit that, they can against Alabama. And I think Tennessee has that talent to be able to do that. And I really see them not running away with that game, but taking that game against Alabama, 31-28. I hope it's a wake-up call for Bama. I really, really do. But as of right now, I'm going to put Tennessee there. Like I said, 31-28. I don't really have anything else to say about that. That hurt. That hurt me in my soul. Okay, second game. I'm going to go with USC over Utah. Utah they've really struggled against their better opponents that they've played. They didn't beat Florida in their first game of the season, and they were predicted to do really well. I just talked about UCLA in my my what did we learn this week. They lost to UCLA by 10 points. It was 42-32. Cam Rising is good, but he has made a couple mistakes over the last few games. And then I'll say this. Utah, in games that they allow over 200 yards rushing, they've lost. That was against Florida, and that was against UCLA. In both those games, they lost to the fact that they just literally couldn't stop the run. USC has Travis Dye, who has rushed for over 100 yards. In 4 of his last 5 games has rushed over 100 yards. And in 3 of those games that he rushed over 100, he didn't even have 20 carries. So I expect a huge load for Travis Dye. And then for him to hit his first 200-yard game this season, congrats ahead of time to you, and congrats to USC. I see them taking that one, 45-31. I think the spread was only like 7 points or something like that. The spread was too low, in my opinion, from what I had saw. Let me pull it up here real quick. The ESPN app always wants to go slow whenever I'm doing my podcast. I swear, man. They want me to fail. What did DJ Khaled say? They don't want you to win. I'm going to win, though. I'm talking about. Here we go. The spread in that game, which is crazy because the matchup predictor actually has Utah 61% and USC 38%. So it's about 60 to 40. They have Utah winning. That's mostly just because it's going to be at Utah. I don't care. That does not mean anything to me. I trust Caleb Williams over Cam Rising. And like I said, Travis Dye is going to have the best game he has had so far this season, really. And they only have 3.5 point favorite on Utah, but I'm going to flip that the other way. Like I said, 45-31. If UCLA can beat Utah by 10, and I think USC is a better team than UCLA, I'm going to give UCLA by 14. So 2 touchdowns, 45-31, high scoring game in that one. Next one, Michigan over Penn State. This is a battle of 2 undefeated teams, both 5-0. Michigan, a lot of defense and then running the ball. Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy has come into his own to an extent this year. He is passing close to 80%, like right under, I think it was like 78 or whatever. But Penn State is allowing over 250 pass yards a game so far. Even though Penn State defensively as a whole, they're solid, but they are allowing over 250 pass yards a game, like I said, which is not great. So I see J.J. McCarthy being able to take advantage of that and a lot in the short passing game, getting passes out quick, letting his guys run and take advantage of those DBs who have been poor tackling and poor coverage. So right now I'm going to say Michigan over Penn State. Of course, still an extremely defensive game because these are 2 defensive teams. I'll say the Big Ten in terms of defense is really, really strong. But I'm going to take Michigan over Penn State 24-17, only a 7-point game. When I checked the matchup, it had Michigan favored, I think, only by a little bit. Oh, actually, they have Michigan favored by 7. So Michigan favored by a touchdown. It is also being played in Ann Arbor at Michigan, so that will also play into it, the crowd getting into the head of Clifford over there. So, yeah, Michigan over Penn State, 24-17. And my next one I have here is actually Kentucky and Mississippi State. And this is kind of a tricky matchup. This is actually my second upset. Mississippi State is favored. Mississippi State currently ranked 16, Kentucky 22. Kentucky lost that game last week because they didn't have their quarterback. Quite honestly, they didn't have Will Levis. The quarterback they put out there did not do well. He only completed like 14 passes. It didn't look good. And then they had 2 turnovers at times that they really couldn't afford them. And I think that was also affected by the quarterback. So I don't see that happening when they have Will Levis in the game. It does say that he has been looking good so far in practice, has been working his shoulder and everything like that. So it does look like he will be coming back. And it's going to be I didn't want to say this because it's cheesy, but it's going to be a battle of will. but I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry. That's the Hawk. But it's going to be a battle of will. Will Rogers versus Will Levis, the 2 quarterbacks. Will Rogers for Mississippi State, Will Levis for Kentucky, going to be going up against each other. Great quarterbacks. But I think what the difference is going to be in the end is the fact that Kentucky does have a defense. They do have a defense that is pretty solid this season. And I think they'll not get a turnover, but I think this is going to be just a battle of who can get more stops. I see Kentucky getting a little bit more stops than what Mississippi State's defense can do. And I think that's going to be the difference in the end. I have Kentucky over Mississippi State, 35-24. And on top of that is being played in Kentucky. And Kentucky has lost their last 2 games straight to Ole Miss and South Carolina. They're going to go out there playing absolutely desperate. That stadium is going to come out there hyped to make sure that their team does not lose 3 in a row. So Kentucky over Mississippi State, 35-24. They have Mississippi State favored in this game, not by much, only 3.5 points. I'm going the opposite way, Kentucky. Clemson over Florida State. I feel like this is a pretty obvious one, and the easiest thing you can really look at is shared opponents. Right now, Clemson has beat their last two opponents in Wake Forest in overtime. They beat NC State 20-10, and then they went out and beat Boston College as well. Florida State has played all of those teams, and those two teams that I just mentioned at the top, Wake Forest and NC State, Florida State just lost to them back-to-back. So I don't know what else you really need to see for you to for that to convince you that Clemson's going to take this game. Clemson coming in 6-0, Florida State 4-2. They do look like they're improving, but I don't think they're quite there yet. I see Clemson kind of running away with this one, 38-14, and Florida State literally lost by 2 to NC State, and Clemson beat them by 10. Clemson handled them very easily the week before. Also, DJ Uyunglele is better than Jordan Travis. And like I said, the two losses that Florida State has had so far came against opponents that Clemson outright beat. Not outright beat, but they beat them. They beat NC State pretty handedly, and they were able to come back and do well in that Wake Forest game and took that one with them as well. So I don't see Clemson losing now. Like I said, 38-14, Clemson over Florida State. I really see Clemson running away with that one, even though it is in Florida State. Last time I checked. Yep, last time it is in Florida State, and then Clemson is a 4.5-point favorite. A super cover, if you're putting money on that game, super cover. This is not financial advice and gambling advice. This is just what I think. But yeah, 38-14 Clemson on that one. Next one, TCU and Oklahoma State. Now, I think this game is going to be very close. Also, two undefeated teams, two ranked teams as well. So we get some more ranked on ranked football for college football fans. Always excited for that. My notes are lagging right now. But I do remember the score that I had for them. I did say that TCU would take this game. I said 45-41. Number 8 ranked Oklahoma State, number 13 ranked TCU. I trust TCU a little bit more than Oklahoma State. I've said this multiple times. I thought Oklahoma State would slip up against Baylor. I thought they might slip up against a team like Kansas or something. But I won't lie, they've held pretty strong. I mean, not Kansas. Against who was it? Well, really, they haven't played anyone, honestly. Yeah, I mean, they played Baylor and they played Texas Tech. So I thought they might slip up along the way, but they haven't yet. Once again, I said this before. I don't fully trust Spencer Sanders, but he is their leader and he has been getting it done. That's hard to deny. He has been their starter for a lot of years. I think he's really close to beating Mason Rudolph's record as a starter at Oklahoma State and how many games he's won as a starter too. So congrats to him. This is not going to be one of them. TCU takes this one 45-41, which is ironic because they do have TCU as a 4-point favorite, which is exactly what I have them as. 4 points over Oklahoma State. This is going to be an all offensive game. I think it's going to come down to the turnover battle. Whoever has the least amount of turnovers is going to win this game, and whoever punts the ball the least is going to win this game. It could very well end up being whoever has the ball last. So TCU, I think they get revenge for their game last year. What happened? 61-17. They got whooped. They're not going to come out and put that up again. 2 ranked wins came before this for TCU. Yes, I know in those 2 ranked wins, they played against Oklahoma, who injured their quarterback around halftime. And then they also had the quarterback injured against Kansas and Jalen Daniels. But, I mean, if you watch that Oklahoma game, TCU would have whooped them anyway. I don't think it really matters. That game ended up being 55-24. The game against Kansas was a little bit closer, 38-31, so 1 touchdown. But they did end up pulling it out. And I have to give TCU credit for that, quarterback or not. So, I mean, Kansas having their quarterback or not, that's what I mean. So, yeah, TCU over Oklahoma State, 45-41 in that game. And then the last one that I have here is Syracuse and NC State. This is another 2 ranked opponents. NC State, only 1 loss this season, and that came to Clemson, like I just mentioned. Syracuse is actually undefeated, 5-0. NC State, 5-1. NC State is ranked 15, Syracuse 18. They have the game as Syracuse, a 3.5-point favorite. I agree. Excuse me. I actually said they cover that 28-20. I have Syracuse over NC State. They have a top 10 defense. NC State is just outside of it. I think they're number 16 ranked in defense. But the difference is going to be the fact that Devin Leary did get hurt in that Florida State game last week. He went out with a shoulder injury. They've been saying that he's day-to-day moving his arm right now. It does look like he's most likely going to play, but still, that doesn't make you feel great against a team that is as good as they are, as the Orange are on defense. So I'm going to take Syracuse over NC State, 28-20 in a close one. So just to do a little recap, Tennessee over Bama, 31-28. USC over Utah, 45-31. Michigan over Penn State, 24-17. Kentucky over Ole Miss, 35-24. Clemson over Florida State, 38-14. TCU over Oklahoma State, 45-41. And then Syracuse over NC State, 28-20. And I want to start keeping track of my record on my picks. I need to go back and look at some of my other episodes to just see how good I'm doing or how bad I'm doing, possibly. I have no idea. I know there has been a few games that I predicted that it been very opposite of what I was predicting to happen in terms of score. I don't know about in terms of wins and losses, but yeah, that's everything I have for this episode. Once again, this will be up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. It will be on YouTube tonight as well. So make sure you guys go and watch it, especially before the games start tomorrow at noon. It's got a huge slate, so I want y'all to get all this information in so you can understand what exactly is going to be happening on this Saturday. And, yeah, deuce. Thank y'all for tuning in.